So real quickly, the North Tarrant Express concessions made up of several different components, and so we'll look at those right now. Segments 1 and 2 are the 820, 121, 183 segments, and then 3A is the blue segment running north along I-35. 3B is the middle section, and then some abutting projects that we have that we're still developing with TxDOT. 3C is the purple to the north. Segment 4 is the green to the south of the interchange there at 820, 121, 183. And then not on here is the Midtown Express, which is the 183 expansion from Euless headed east to Dallas. So a little bit about what the concession consists of. And then more importantly, segments 1 and 2, which is what we're here to talk about today. 1 and 2 is a 13-mile stretch along 820, 121, 183. Construction began in October 2010 and was complete in October 2014, 9-10 months ahead of schedule?
Almost 9.5 months.
So, and then a cross-section of what got built. And so the $2.1 billion reconstruction rebuilt 4 to 6 general purpose lanes. It added 4 Texpress lanes down the middle. It added some frontage roads and some auxiliary lanes. And essentially, the project doubled in capacity. So, Christy, back to you for a polling question.
Okay, let's test our audience smarts. How many individual companies were used on the NTE project? Okay, we were close, but the answer, I believe, is C. So, quite a few. Right? So, I understand this project's entered the operations and maintenance phase already, so I'm going to ask Robert to walk us through how the first year went.
Absolutely, thanks. The corridor, as you heard mentioned, actually opened on October 4th of 2014. And what we had measured during the 4.5 years of construction of the North Tarrant Express is that about 20 to 25% of the traffic left the corridor. They went over to Highway 10 that ran on the south side. They went over to some of the cross streets that ran on the north side, and just stayed out of the construction zone as much as they possibly could, anybody who knew the back roads. But traffic came back very quickly, and what we've been able to see in the last full year of operation is that traffic has completely come back. We're running at a lot higher rate than what we were before we started construction. About 23%, I think, is what you can see on that slide. We've ran about 2.1 million different vehicles through the managed lanes across those 6 cities and that 13.5 miles of the North Tarrant Express. As of August 31 was the last reporting number that we had. And even the non-tolled lanes are moving at about 5% more traffic. But what we're seeing is that basically doubling the corridor, which is what Scott pointed out, by putting in those auxiliary lanes, the contiguous frontage roads, and rebuilding all of that 50-year-old infrastructure with 21st century design, better weaving and distances and entrances and exits. It's just made travel along that corridor a whole lot more effective. So what we have seen is about an 80% reduction in congestion. Now, has that completely eliminated congestion on the NTE? Absolutely not. Any of you that know anything about the NTE, there is one point about the halfway point where you come off of 183, 121 to go south on 820, which they call the East Loop, right by Northeast Mall, and it always bottlenecks up right there. Well, and everybody asked why. We thought this was supposed to relieve congestion. Well, at peak, that 6 to 9, that 4 to 7 in the afternoon, when everybody's trying to get in and out of that corridor, everybody's trying to leave that brand new double capacity North Tarrant Express and get themselves onto a corridor that hasn't been even touched yet. So there are still some congestion points, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later with the whole managed lane concept that's being played out in North Texas. And the benefit in time saved, of course, you know, the engineers, which I know most of you are, which is I'll try to reserve all my engineer jokes. Well, at least they got a chuckle.
We have lawyer jokes.
Yes, I know you do. And lots of them. The benefit in time saved and wasted fuel, as you can see there, since opening the corridor a year ago, $17.1 million. To me, that's absolutely incredible, and that helps attain both the moving of the better mobility through those 6 cities in that North Tarrant Express corridor, and it helps the Regional Transportation Council, the folks over at the Council of Governments, reach that environmental attainment level a whole lot better than what they were doing on that mostly congested corridor. I want to continue. Some of the major initiatives, Scott alluded to a few of them. We'll talk about a few more. One of the most important things on this project when we first started, because it was a design build, and if there was processes going on simultaneously from day one, where right-of-way had already been acquired by TxDOT to a certain level, but we took over acquiring the last, 299, I think, parcels. That was going on at the same time that utilities were being moved, at the same time that construction was already beginning on places where there had been right-of-way already acquired. So it was a very fast-paced process. You saw those 2,800 jobs that were created. Those 2,800 jobs were working out in that 13.5-mile corridor in real short order, 24 hours a day, usually 7 days a week, doing something. So it was a very fast-paced project. There was a city councilman in the city of Bedford, told us very early on, that was the first city that we met with, and he looked at myself and my colleagues. I'd taken several of our engineers over there with us to address the city council, and he said, "You cannot over-communicate what you're about to do to us." And he was exactly right. You know, he knew that we were going to make their lives miserable for about 3.5 to 4 years, and he wanted to make sure that everything we communicated was for the benefit of those people that were either traveling the highway or those folks that were living or trying to work around the corridor. So with our partners at TxDOT, the PIO staff up there in the Special Projects Division in the Fort Worth District, we've worked collaboratively together for the last 4.5 years to create a huge communications process, both electronically through the website, through Twitter, through Facebook, through personal presentations. I mean, it didn't matter if it was a Lions Club or a Kiwanis Club. If you'd feed us or just have cookies and milk, we'd come talk to you and tell you what was going to happen on the project. We went to neighborhood associations, and that really did turn out to be one of the most beneficial aspects of the project, is the fact that we did communicate, we did collaborate. Not much snuck up on us. We were always had somebody in our group looking around a corner, trying to figure out what was going to come up next. And that turned out to be a very important aspect of the project. Regular coordination meetings, Scott can speak to this a whole lot better, but we had coordination meetings not only with us, the communicators, and what we needed to communicate, but in order to have the information to communicate, we had to sit with the traffic guys. We had to sit with the schedulers. We had to sit with the construction segment managers and figure out what it was they were going to be doing, because we promised everyone out there, from the motorist to the resident, that we were going to continually give you a 6 week look ahead, depending on where we were in the project at that time. Another thing that we did was collaborative safety campaigns. You know, with that much construction, those many people out in the 13.5-mile corridor, safety becomes real important, both for the driver as well as those workers that are out there in the corridor. So we collaborated again with TxDOT and the Federal Highway Administration once a year in April, I believe, on the I can't remember what was that week called in April.
No, National Work Zone.
National Work Zone Safety Week. And then we would enhance that throughout the year with some radio spots. We would go in and sponsor the traffic programs on the radio stations. We would sponsor the traffic page on the television stations. We would do that with the chambers of commerce. Any place that we could put information out to lead people to that website, which is where they were going to get the latest data and the latest information, and that whole know before you go where the closures are going to be. Because if you've been in a design build project, how you left your home that morning could be completely different when you came home that night. I mean, it happened that way a lot of times, and that would aggravate a whole lot of people. Trust me, I heard from most of them. Toward the end of the project, most of them were my friends and family. But, you know, there was a whole lot of information that had to be shared on a regular basis. Corporate social responsibility was something that TxDOT had encouraged us to do. And once we got in and figured out exactly what our corporate agenda was, we hooked up with a program called the National Math and Science Initiative, raising our own work staff, so to speak. Okay, so we went out into the high schools in the two districts, HEB and Birdville Independent School District, and found some schools that we could go in and help collaboratively put together a NIMSY program, a STEM program in high schools in the corridor, so that we were contributing not only to training of teachers that were teaching that science, technology, engineering, and math, but also rewarding the students who were achieving and scoring high on those tests in those higher end classes. We were rewarding them so that there was some incentive for those students to get involved. We still continue that program today, both in the North Tarrant Express project, the LBJ project, and the 35W project, because we have seen how it impacts schools and how it impacts students. The managed lanes education process, when we started the North Tarrant Express 6.5 years ago, you would start talking about managed lanes to a group of audience, and it didn't matter who it was. It could be a whole group of elected officials who are all real smart business folks, but you start talking about managed lanes and that their heads would just, it was like a puppy dog. They just start giving you this. What the hell are you talking about? So we had to figure out how to really dumb it down. Of course, we had to figure out how to do that for ourselves, the communicators, because none of us are engineers. So we had to figure out how to dumb it down just a little bit and start from scratch and start teaching people exactly what a managed lane was. It wasn't just the fact that we were coming in and rebuilding a corridor and ripping it completely out, dumping a whole bunch of it back in, adding a few little widgets here, on the sides with frontage roads and bypass lanes, but we were throwing in these toll lanes so we could just come in there and suck money out of people's pockets. That wasn't what it was all about, but a whole lot of people thought that was what it was all about. So it took on a whole life process with us, TxDOT, with all the public information officers, with all of our partners in the project, with the guys out at the Council of Governments, the Regional Transportation Council, and it became a family effort to try and teach people exactly what these managed lanes were and exactly how they were supposed to operate. It paid off. Because of, we worked collaboratively with TxDOT again, because sometimes they would enter contests that applied specifically to them. Sometimes we would enter contests that were out there that we could participate in with the application. Sometimes we would go through our public relations firm, Cooksey Communications, who has been a wonderful firm. They've got a lot of transportation background, and we won a lot of awards. We got a lot of attention for the North Tarrant Express project. And about halfway through that project, you could see where a lot of these awards were coming in. This is not all of them. This is just some of the highlighted ones. But about 2012, when we started, really racking up the awards, us in the communications office and the corporate affairs office, we'd look at each other and go, man, I hope this comes out well. Because we were running real fast and we were running real hard, and there was a whole lot happening out there. But again, not being an engineer, and I got something going on here, and I got something going on here, and I got something going on here, it was real hard for me to fathom and see how all those pieces were going to connect and those lanes were all going to come together at the end. And I know a lot of people in the public were saying that same thing because they would question us about it. But it really did. It came out great. It's one of the best projects, I think, that has been built in North Texas. And it has received a ton of recognition. The collaboration was the key, which we've talked a lot about today, and I know Scott's going to jump in on a little bit more of that. But you can see in that first line, it took TxDOT, our folks, NTEMP, NTE Mobility Partners. It took our independent engineers, the guys at CH2M Hill, and it took Tarrant County, and it took all 6 of those cities. Now, I think that that may not sound like a whole lot, but you start thinking about trying to build a highway project simultaneously through 6 cities. That means 6 city councils, 6 city managers, 6 public works directors. I mean, it was a little daunting and a little overwhelming at times because everybody knew that this project was going to happen at some point in time. But even after we started construction back in 2009, 2010, there were still some people in the audiences and some people in the cities were saying, "Oh no, you'll never get this project completed. It'll never happen. You've been talking about this for 25 years. It's never going to happen." And so once they realized that the project was actually going to become a reality, the lights came on, and they all started going, "Oh my gosh, it's going to be real. Well, if it's going to be real, we want this, and we want this, and we want this, and we want this." Y'all have never had to deal with that, have you? Never at all. So we would have to step in again with our partners at TxDOT and Michael Morris and the Regional Transportation Council and the folks out at the COG, and we would have to work these cities through what we could do, what we couldn't do, how we could get it into the design, because the design was an ongoing, continuous basis as well. And it was tough at times, but because we were civil with each other, we were collaborative with each other, we even tried to be cooperative with each other 9 times out of 10. We would come to 9 times out of 10 some conclusion that worked out to the benefit of everybody. What TxDOT wanted, what we decided we could build, and what the cities decided they wanted, and was the best benefit for their citizens. You can see here too, there were almost 200,000 cars a day that traveled in that corridor before we started building it. It's well up to that amount now, and slowly growing beyond that amount. There were an estimated 1 million residents, businesses, and organizations, churches, folks that were operating up and down that 13.5-mile corridor that were impacted every day, and 2 school districts who have a lot of facilities. I didn't really realize, even though I grew up there in Haltom City, I didn't really realize just how many school facilities butted up to the NTE corridor until we actually started building across that 13.5 miles across those 6 cities. But everybody got some good out of it. I know you guys have got one of the best right-of-way guys in the country, probably, in Don Toner. We think we've got number 2 in Dennis Sedlacek, and that guy can cut a right-of-way deal as well as anybody that I've ever met in my entire life. In fact, I renamed him after about a year and a half into the project. Instead of Sedlacek, I renamed him Dennis Settle with a check. Because, man, he can get that checkbook out and he'd have you just frothing at the mouth, ready to take the check from him in order to keep the project on task and on time. But it all worked out together because it came out the way that it was supposed to. And we did finish the North Tarrant Express project about 9.5 months ahead of schedule. But I have to admit, that was only because of the collaboration of all the parties, all those folks you see listed up there at the top, and the willingness to sit down at the table and work out whatever problems came to the table and get beyond them, so we could keep the project moving as quickly as we possibly could.
Okay. Ready for another pop quiz? So, how many safety orientations were conducted on the NTE project?
This is a trick question too. What as tricky as I thought.
Good answer. All right. So Robert was mentioning how important collaboration was on this project between 6 different cities, NTEMP, as well as TxDOT. So I'd like to ask Scott to tell us from a TxDOT perspective how we were involved in that collaboration.
So as you can see from the map, and it didn't come out quite as good as it looks right here, but all the different city boundaries, and some cities had a little more per linear foot of city limits than others, but they all thought they were number 1. And so to Renee's credit and her staff's credit, during the design and construction phase, Renee did a good job of going out and meeting with the cities, establishing some expectations. And so it's been really easy in the O&M phase for me to come in and just follow what she established with the cities. Robert and I continue to meet with the cities quarterly or as they have concerns. And so far, the questions have been minimal. You know, they want some clarification on who's supposed to mow what. They wanted a dual right-hand turn lane converted back to a single right-hand turn lane. So it's been minor tweaks and changes, some signal timing adjustments. So it's all been minor. It's working well. One of the things that we use, and this is a kind of a shout out to CH2M Hill for developing this app. So it's our maintenance app. And so Robert and his team, TxDOT team, independent engineer team, folks back at the TxDOT district office have access to this app. And so when they see something that needs to be fixed, or if it's just the general routine maintenance, they can go out, they can take a picture of it, it logs it, it keeps track of it, and then when it's fixed, so you have the time that it needs to be fixed in order to keep from incurring any non-compliance points. And then once it's fixed, it falls off the list and goes into the database. So that's been extremely handy and useful for all of us, and it can be done from a computer, smartphone, tablet, in the field, and so it makes it really easy to track the maintenance items. And so the next couple slides, just a couple of examples of the collaboration and cooperation with the cities. The city of Haltom City wanted to build a backage road or some jug handles, and so they were tying into the NTE facility, and so that's just a picture of that. And so we had to work with them over time to get that built in a certain time and keep them from interfering with the expansion of the North Tarrant Express. And then the other one is a little bit bigger. This is segment 4, and so as we continue to develop segment 4, we're going to be tying in managed lanes to managed lanes, general purpose lanes, frontage roads, and so we're going to have to be really careful and cautious not to disrupt NTE's managed lanes, their toll integration system, their infrastructure there to keep from knocking out their tolling equipment. So the collaboration and cooperation between us and NTEMP is going to be critical as we develop 183 Midtown Express and segment 4. So with that, Christy, back to you.
Okay. So last two polling questions. How many lane closures were experienced on the segments 1 and 2 project?
I think they figured this out.
Not sure if people experience this themselves, but they seem to think answer C.
These guys are real smart.
All right.
And then the last one.
And the peak daily construction expenditures, it totaled what dollar value? Smart again? Always C?
That's
Yeah,
correct.
that's what I did in school.
Yeah, it was a
C.
little, I meant to ask Jason about that. There was a little pattern
If
there on
unknown.
that, buddy.
All right. That conclude?
That concludes, and so questions?
Insults? Comments?
A question? What would you have done different related to the whole project?
Gosh, I don't know. On 1 and 2, I'm not sure. I mean, it was the what, Brian? Aesthetics. Oh my gosh, I hadn't even thought about the aesthetics committee. We had to have an aesthetics committee, and we all know how committees are. But we had to have an aesthetics committee, and it was one person from each city. No, one staffer from each city and one elected official from each city. And then I think Tarrant County got a rep, and I'm not sure. We met on a regular basis. We were meeting on a weekly basis, and then, you know, I mean, there was just so much consternation. You can only imagine what was going on in there, because sitting around the table with all these different people, they had all these different colors that they wanted to make the highway. Okay? Your Aggies wanted to make it maroon. Your Longhorns wanted to make it burnt orange. I mean, you know, there was just so many different, and everybody wanted something different. And it took, what, 18 months or so? Do you remember? 2 years? Right up to the very end. Right up to the very end.
I realized it was a 4-letter word about 6 months.
Actually, yeah, we won't even have to say those 4-letter words, Marty. But that was probably the, and I'm not sure how you changed that. Now that we've got it down, I've kind of blocked that aesthetics out of the way, because everything else is going to look like that because it connects to it. So we've already kind of, they're, if you haven't been on the North Tarrant Express, they're very neutral colors, earth tones, if you will. I think I'm kind of colorblind, but that's what it looks like to me out there. And it's just a real good looking highway, and all the poles, what was that? They were all black. What do y'all call that? Where you powder coated, and fancy lights and the bridge rails and all that sort of stuff. I mean, it's a good looking highway. And so I guess the aesthetics committee arguments and fights were probably worth it, because even that was a collaborative effort in and of itself, even though there had to be some strong arming and cajoling there toward the end to get everybody on the same page. We actually did it, but that was probably the one thing. Other than, we could go back and examine every individual little facet that was going on with the NTE, and hopefully those innovations and those better ways of doing it have rolled over to the 35W project and any other project that will get built in a P3 design build model in North Texas. But it really was a great success, and we're real proud of the way it looks, and we're real proud of the way it's operating. Yes, sir.
Is there any discussion about doing a direct connect on northbound 820 to westbound toll lanes? Because you can't go westbound. If you're coming up northbound 820, you can go 183 directly.
Oh, right, but you can't go westbound until you get around to, what is that, Roof Snow? Right around Roof Snow?
Which is the pinch point we talked about.
Right. Repeat the question. He wants to know if there was any discussion ever, and the answer is yes, of going northbound on 820, the east loop, to westbound 820, the north loop, right there by Northeast Mall. And I know there were discussions that took place. Do you might be able to help Renee a little bit? I know it had to do with traffic numbers, with the amount of traffic that moved through there.
That's what we found with the traffic numbers, is if you're familiar with the area, people that are wanting to go west, particularly going up 35 and coming in.
Right.
And not taking that movement from 121. That may change as the project develops, but when it was first implemented, we didn't see that movement being necessary.
Right. I still get cussed a lot because of that too, though.
Well, that's the pinch point.
That's it is. It is definitely one of the pinch points at peak. During the day and in the middle of the night, it all runs just smooth as glass. But 6 to 9 and 4 to 7, it's definitely one of those pinch points in the corridor.